The noise of my own 30th birthday party fades into a dull hum. I'm standing in our kitchen, the one Olivia and I picked out tiles for, arguing good-naturedly over a hideous avocado green. Now, I'm frozen. My girlfriend of 5 years, Olivia, is laughing. It's a bright, genuine laugh, the kind that used to be just for me. But it's not directed at me. It's for Michael. My best friend, Michael. She hands him a drink, their fingers brushing. It's not a quick, accidental touch. It lingers, way too long. My stomach plummets, a sickening lurch like a faulty elevator. It's not just friendly, it's electric. A raw, undeniable chemistry that crackles in the air between them. I see it. And as my gaze sweeps across the other faces in the kitchen, the forced smiles, the quick, knowing glances darted between my other friends, I realize with a cold dread that everyone sees it. Everyone, it seems, except me, until now. My name is James. I'm an architect here in Chicago. Successful, if you measure success by the square footage of the buildings I helped design or the steady paycheck that hits my account. But uninspired? Yeah, lately that's been the word clinging to me like the city's winter chill. The spark I once had for clean lines and innovative structures has dimmed, replaced by a kind of weary competence. I churn out designs for condos and office blocks, functional, approved, but rarely exciting. Olivia and I, we were the couple everyone expected to last. College sweethearts. We met in a crowded lecture hall. Introduction to art history, if you can believe it. I was there because it was a required credit. She was there because she genuinely loved it. She had this way of talking about Renaissance painters like they were old friends. I was instantly captivated. That was 5 years ago. Now we share an apartment in Lincoln Park, a mortgage, and a life that, from the outside, probably looks pretty perfect. Our life together has become comfortable, predictable. Weekends are for brunch, laundry, and maybe a movie if we're not too tired. Weeknights are a quiet rhythm of dinners eaten while scrolling through our phones, a brief catch-up about our days, then retreating to our respective corners of the couch. The passion that once defined us has settled into a quiet companionship. It's not bad, not exactly. But it's not what I dreamed of either. It's just easy. Too easy, maybe. Then there's Michael, my best friend since we were awkward freshmen fumbling through high school, navigating terrible haircuts and even worse romantic choices together. He's the brother I never had. For the past few years he's been globe-trotting, teaching English in various far-flung corners of the world. But about 6 months ago he announced he was coming home, back to Chicago to settle down, as he put it. I was thrilled. Olivia was too, or so I thought. We'd always been a trio in many ways. Tonight is my 30th birthday, a milestone. And I've been planning something big. In the top drawer of my dresser, nestled in a small velvet box, is an engagement ring. A princess-cut diamond, classic, elegant, just like Olivia. I'd imagined this moment for months. At dinner, surrounded by our closest friends and family, I'd get down on one knee. I pictured her gasp, the tears in her eyes, the resounding yes that would set the course for the rest of our lives. The perfect ending to my perfect birthday, launching us into our perfect future. I remember when we first met like it was yesterday. I'd accidentally knocked her meticulously organized notes off her desk. Pages scattered everywhere. I was mortified, stammering apologies. She just laughed, a bright, musical sound that cut through the stuffy lecture hall air. "It's okay," she'd said, her eyes sparkling. "Gives us a reason to talk, right?" And we did. We talked for hours that day about art, about our dreams, about everything and nothing. There was a genuine spark, an instant connection that felt rare and precious. We built our world together, brick by brick, shared memories, inside jokes, a whole language that only we understood. Lately, though, if I'm being honest with myself, there have been signs. Little cracks in the foundation of our perfect life that I'd chosen to ignore, papering over them with wishful thinking. Olivia's been distant. Not in an obvious, dramatic way, but in subtle shifts. The way she'd pull away slightly when I reached for her hand. The decrease in those spontaneous hugs. The casual touches that used to punctuate our days. Our intimacy had waned, become more of a routine than a desire. And her phone. Her phone had become an extension of her hand, always angled away from me, a quick tap to dim the screen if I walked into the room unexpectedly. I'd told myself it was work stress, or maybe she was just tired. I made excuses because the alternative was too painful to consider. But tonight, all those ignored whispers of doubt are drowned out by the buzz of my own party, the anticipation of the proposal. This is it, my 30th, the start of a new decade, a new chapter. I've got the woman I love, my best friend back in town, a career. Everything is falling into place. Or so I believed, right up until I walked into my own kitchen. The laughter around me is a mix of familiar voices. My parents, my sister, college buddies, a few colleagues. They're all here to celebrate me. The apartment is filled with the warm glow of fairy lights Olivia insisted on stringing up, the scent of the catering I'd splurged on, and the murmur of conversations. It was supposed to be perfect. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, from the playlist to the brand of champagne. I'd even practiced my proposal speech in front of the bathroom mirror, feeling like a fool but wanting it to be just right. I'd imagined this night countless times. Olivia by my side, her hand in mine, her smile reflecting my own happiness. We'd be the golden couple, stepping confidently into the next phase of our lives. The proposal wouldn't just be a question. It would be an affirmation of everything we'd built, everything we were, everything we would be. It was meant to be the culmination of our love story, a story I thought was written in stone. Now, watching her with Michael, a different story is rapidly, painfully, unfolding before my eyes. And I'm not the main character anymore. The morning of my birthday started like any other Saturday, almost. Olivia was up before me, which was unusual. I found her in the living room, nursing a coffee, staring out the window at the gray Chicago sky. She seemed distracted, her replies to my morning greetings a little too quick, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Just thinking about the party," she'd said when I asked if everything was okay. I'd brushed it off. Party jitters, maybe. Or maybe she was just as excited as I was about the evening, albeit in her own, quieter way. I let it go, eager to hold on to the good mood, the sense of occasion. By early evening, our apartment was buzzing. Friends and family started to arrive in a steady stream, bringing with them gifts, laughter, and well wishes. My parents were beaming. My sister, Sarah, was already teasing me about hitting the big 3, 0. It was exactly as I'd pictured, a warm, happy chaos. I played the host, refilling drinks, accepting backslaps, feeling the glow of being surrounded by people I loved. Michael arrived late. That was the first tiny, discordant note in the symphony of the evening. He was usually Mr. Punctual. He rushed in, full of apologies, blaming traffic that, even for a Saturday, seemed an unlikely culprit. He handed me an expensive-looking bottle of single-malt scotch, a generous gift, even for him. But his usual easygoing charm was overlaid with a strange nervousness. His eyes kept darting around the room, never quite settling on mine for more than a second. He looked unsettled. As the party got into full swing, I started to notice things. Small things, almost imperceptible if you weren't looking, or if you didn't want to see. A shared glance between Michael and Olivia that lasted a fraction of a second too long. The way they seemed to gravitate towards the same conversational circles, their shoulders brushing. Olivia would laugh at something Michael said, a private, knowing laugh, and he'd look at her with an intensity that felt off. I told myself I was being paranoid, reading too much into it. It's Michael, my best friend. It's Olivia, the love of my life. They're just happy he's back. That's all." Then came the pivotal moment. I'd gone to the bar I'd set up in the dining room to grab another beer when I realized we were out of limes. "I'll get them from the kitchen," I called out, heading that way. The kitchen door was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, the scene that greeted me seared itself into my brain. Olivia and Michael were standing close. Too close. Not quite touching, but the space between them was charged, humming with an unspoken energy. Olivia was saying something, her voice low, her expression earnest. Michael was listening, his gaze fixed on her face, a soft, almost tender look in his eyes. It wasn't the way a man looks at his best friend's girlfriend. It was something more, something deeper, something that excluded me entirely. Time seemed to slow down. The music from the living room, the chatter of our guests, it all receded into a distant buzz. All I could see was them, Olivia and Michael, caught in this bubble of intimacy. The chemistry I'd glimpsed earlier wasn't just a spark, it was a full-blown fire, and I was standing on the outside, watching it burn. It was undeniable, a punch to the gut that left me winded. My mind, desperate for an alternative explanation, flashed back to a few weeks ago. Michael had called, asking if Olivia was free for coffee. He'd just moved into his new apartment and wanted her opinion on some decorating ideas, he'd said. I was swamped at work, pulling long hours on a new project. "Sure, go for it," I'd told him. Glad she had some company. Glad he was settling in. Then there was another time. A quick lunch to catch up. Again while I was buried in blueprints and deadlines. Innocent, I'd thought. Of course it was innocent. Why wouldn't it be? Now those innocent coffees and lunches took on a new, sinister meaning. They weren't just catch-ups. They were opportunities, stolen moments. My throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. I mumbled something about needing the bathroom and backed out of the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't go to the guest bathroom off the hall. I went to our bedroom, a sanctuary that suddenly felt violated. Olivia's purse was on the bed, her phone, left behind in her haste to rejoin the party, or perhaps to speak to Michael, lay beside it. I've never invaded her privacy, never. But a desperate, ugly feeling was clawing its way up my throat. I picked up her phone. It was unlocked. My fingers, trembling slightly, tapped on her messaging app. Michael's name was at the top of the recent chats. My blood ran cold. "Can't wait to see you tonight." Michael had sent that earlier. "Me neither. It's complicated." Olivia's reply. "It doesn't have to be." Then, from a few days prior, "Today was nice, more than nice." That was Olivia. Michael's response, "You have no idea." And then the one that shattered the last vestiges of my denial, a message from Olivia to Michael from the week before. "I feel things with you I haven't felt in so long, Em. It scares me." Don't be scared, Liv. Just feel it. Weeks. This had been going on for weeks, an emotional affair unfolding right under my nose while I blissfully planned our future. The air rushed out of my lungs. The slick, expensive phone felt like a lead weight in my hand. The casual intimacy of their words, the shared secrets, the clear, undeniable connection, it was all there, in stark black and white. Betrayal, sharp and brutal, twisted in my gut. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the screen, the damning words blurring before my eyes. Eventually, the sound of laughter from the other room, my laughter, filtered through my shock. The party, my birthday party. I had to go back out there. I placed the phone back on the bed, exactly as I'd found it. Took a deep, shaky breath, walked to our bathroom, splashed cold water on my face. My reflection stared back. A hollow-eyed stranger. I had to maintain composure. I couldn't let them know, not yet, not like this. Returning to the party was surreal. The vibrant colors seemed too bright, the music too loud, the laughter too forced. My own smile felt like a grotesque mask plastered on my face. I watched them now, Olivia and Michael, with a new, horrifying clarity. Every shared glance, every casual touch, every hushed word was a fresh stab of pain. They were so careful, so subtle. But I saw it all. The way her eyes followed him when he moved across the room. The way he'd find excuses to be near her. Then came the cake. My sister carried it out, candles blazing, everyone singing, "Happy Birthday." Olivia was beside me, her arm linked through mine, her smile radiant for the crowd. She even leaned in and kissed my cheek. A Judas kiss. I made a wish, though for what I couldn't have said, and blew out the candles. Everyone clapped. I forced another smile, feeling my world crumbling around me, piece by agonizing piece. The taste of the chocolate cake was like ash in my mouth. This wasn't just a birthday party anymore. It was the scene of a crime, and I was the unsuspecting victim. The last guest finally trickled out around 2 a.m. The apartment, usually a haven of comfortable quiet after a party, felt thick with unspoken words, heavy with the residue of my shattered illusions. Music still played softly from the speakers, a forgotten playlist that now seemed to mock the festive atmosphere it was meant to create. Empty glasses and discarded napkins littered the surfaces, remnants of a celebration that had turned into a wake. Olivia was in the kitchen, starting to gather plates. Her movements were brisk, almost too efficient, as if trying to busy herself to avoid the inevitable. I watched her for a moment, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd planned to marry. The image of her and Michael in this very kitchen, their faces close, their connection palpable, replayed in my mind. The texts, their secret language. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the warmth it usually held for her. She turned, a plate in her hand. Her smile was a little too bright, a little too forced. "Can it wait until morning, James? I'm exhausted." "No," I said, the single word hanging heavy in the air. "It can't." I walked over to the living room, where the remnants of my birthday gifts lay in a colorful pile. I didn't sit. I couldn't. I felt too coiled, too raw. She followed me, her brow furrowed with a feigned concern that now felt like another layer of deceit. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft. "Did something happen at the party?" I almost laughed. Did something happen? Only my entire world tilting on its axis. "I saw you, Olivia," I began, keeping my voice even, though a storm was raging inside me. "In the kitchen, with Michael." Her face paled just slightly, but her eyes held a flicker of something. Fear? Guilt? "What are you talking about? We were just talking." Her denial was quick, almost reflexive. "Don't," I said, my voice dropping, laced with a pain so profound it surprised even me. "Please, just don't lie to me, not anymore." I paused, then delivered the blow. "I also saw your phone, the messages." That did it. The carefully constructed dam of her composure broke. The plate she was still holding clattered to the floor, miraculously not shattering, but the sound was loud in the sudden, suffocating silence. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over, tracing paths down her cheeks. She sank onto the couch, her shoulders shaking. "Oh, James," she whispered, her voice choked with sobs. "I'm so sorry, so sorry." Sorry. The word felt so small, so inadequate for the chasm that had just opened between us. "How could you?" I asked, the question raw with disbelief. "With Michael, my best friend?" The confession came tumbling out, a torrent of tearful explanations and half-formed excuses. "It just happened," she said. The classic, infuriating line. "We started talking, really talking, after he moved back. About things. About us." "Us?" I repeated, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "What about us?" "Things haven't been right for a while, James. You know that." Her voice was barely audible. "We've been drifting. It's become so routine, the spark. It's been gone for so long." Her words, though true in their own way, felt like a betrayal in themselves. Had she ever talked to me about this? Had she ever suggested we try to fix it? To find that spark again? No. She'd found it with someone else instead. With my best friend. "So, you talked to Michael about our problems? Instead of me?" The hurt was a physical ache in my chest. "He understood," she said, looking down at her hands, now twisted in her lap. "He listened. It wasn't planned, James. I never meant to hurt you. The feelings, they just grew." As she spoke, her phone, lying on the coffee table between us, buzzed. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Of course. Perfect timing. A bitter, reckless anger surged through me. Before Olivia could react, I snatched the phone and answered it, putting it on speaker. "She's a little busy right now, Michael," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Silence on the other end. Then, Michael's hesitant voice. "James, what's going on? Is Liv okay?" "Oh, she's just wonderful," I spat. "Just confessing her undying, newly discovered feelings for you. You know, the ones that had just happened." "James, man, let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "Explain how you stabbed your best friend in the back? Explain how you pursued my girlfriend, the woman I was about to ask to marry me?" The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. I saw Olivia flinch, her eyes wide with a fresh wave of tears. The proposal. Another casualty of their betrayal. "Meet me," I said, the decision forming in an instant. "The old dive bar, O'Malley's, half an hour." I didn't wait for a reply. I hung up, tossing the phone back onto the coffee table. Olivia looked at me, her face a mask of misery. "James, please." "Get your things, Olivia," I said, my voice cold, hard. I couldn't look at her anymore. "I think it's best if you're not here when I get back." The drive to O'Malley's was a blur. The late-night streets of Chicago streaked past, a watercolor painting of neon and shadows. My mind was a chaotic swirl of anger, pain, and a crushing sense of loss. O'Malley's was our spot, Michael's and mine. Countless nights spent there, dissecting life, celebrating victories, mourning defeats. Now, it was to be the stage for the final act of our friendship. He was already there, hunched over a whiskey at a corner table, looking a decade older than he had a few hours ago. The usual confident swagger was gone, replaced by a weary slump. I sat down opposite him, the silence stretching taut between us. The bartender, a familiar face, raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "So," I began, my voice dangerously low. "Talk." Michael finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a wretchedness that, on any other occasion, I might have pitied. "There's no excuse, James. What I did, what we did, it was wrong, terribly wrong." "You think?" I shot back, the sarcasm thick. "I trusted you, Michael. More than anyone." He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "I know. And I betrayed that trust. When I moved back, Liv and I, we just connected. It started as friendship, I swear. We'd talk for hours. She wasn't happy, James, in her relationship with you. So you decided to swoop in? Play the hero?" The accusation was bitter on my tongue. No, it wasn't like that. My feelings for her, they just developed. I fought them, James. I really did, but... He trailed off, unable to meet my gaze. But you couldn't resist, right? I finished for him, the words laced with contempt. Did you sleep with her, Michael? Did you physically cheat? The question was brutal, a desperate need to know the full extent of the betrayal. He finally looked up, his eyes pleading. No, it never got that far. It was an emotional thing. We talked, we connected. There were a few kisses recently. That's it. I swear to you, James. We never slept together. A few kisses. As if that made it any better. The intimacy they'd shared, the emotional infidelity, was in many ways worse than a purely physical act. It was a betrayal of the mind, of the heart. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? My best friend and my girlfriend. The two people I'd trusted most in the world. I love her, James, Michael said quietly, his voice hoarse. I think I'm in love with her. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. He loved her, and from what I'd seen, from the messages on her phone, she felt something profound for him too. I stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the wooden floor. There's nothing more to say. My voice was hollow. You got what you wanted, both of you. I walked out, leaving him there with his whiskey and his confession. The drive home was even worse than the drive there. The anger had subsided, leaving behind a vast, empty ache. When I got back to the apartment, it was quiet. Too quiet. Olivia's suitcase was gone from the hallway. I walked into our bedroom. My bedroom now, I guess. Her side of the closet was half empty. Her toiletries were gone from the bathroom. She'd packed quickly, efficiently. On my dresser, where I'd left my wallet and keys, was a note. Simple, stark. I'm so sorry, James. I need space to figure things out. I'll stay with a friend for now. Space. She needed space. After 5 years, after building a life together, after I was about to put a ring on her finger, she needed space. With him, presumably. I opened the top drawer of my dresser. The velvet box sat there, untouched. I picked it up, the weight of it surprisingly heavy in my hand. I opened it. The diamond winked mockingly in the dim light, the symbol of a future that would never be. Olivia was gone. Michael was gone. My perfect life. The one I thought I had been a lie. And as I stood there, in the ruins of my 30th birthday, the only thing I felt was a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. She'd walked out, and the ring, the promise, the future, all of it, sat cold and useless in my hand. The weeks that followed were a blur of gray, a monotonous cycle of waking up to an empty apartment, dragging myself to work, and returning to the suffocating silence that Olivia's absence had left behind. Depression settled over me like a heavy, damp shroud, and anger was its constant simmering companion. One moment I'd be replaying every shared glance between Olivia and Michael, every seemingly innocent comment, searching for clues I'd missed, my stomach churning with a fresh wave of betrayal. The next, a leaden despair would crush me, leaving me staring blankly at the television, the sound muted for hours on end. Friends, bless them, tried to rally. Some took my side unequivocally, their outrage a pale reflection of my own. They'd call, text, suggest drinks or a game, their pity a well-meaning but uncomfortable balm. Others were more diplomatic, sympathetic to Olivia and Michael, even. These things happen, James. Maybe it was for the best. Relationships are complicated. Their attempts at even-handedness felt like tiny, fresh paper cuts on an already gaping wound. I started to avoid calls, to let texts go unanswered. The effort of pretending to be okay, or even just pretending to want to be okay, was too exhausting. Work became an almost insurmountable challenge. My focus, usually sharp and precise, was shattered. I'd stare at blueprints for hours, the lines blurring, the dimensions meaningless. Deadlines loomed, then passed, unmet. My boss, Mr. Henderson, a stern but fair man who'd always valued my contributions, called me into his office. He was concerned. I was making mistakes, careless errors that could have serious consequences. I nearly lost an important client, a residential complex project I'd been leading for months. He didn't yell. Worse, he looked disappointed. "Get your head straight, James," he'd said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Whatever's going on in your personal life, don't let it derail your career." Then came the text from Olivia, short, brutal, and delivered with the impersonal coldness of a digital guillotine. "James, I need to be honest. I'm moving in with Michael. I think this is it for us. I'm sorry." Sorry. Again. As if that could somehow lessen the blow. Moving in with him. So much for needing space to figure things out. She'd figured it out, all right. She'd chosen him, officially. That was rock bottom. The flimsy scaffolding of hope I'd clung to. That maybe this was a temporary madness. That she'd realize her mistake and come back. Collapsed. I started drinking more. Not socially, not to numb the pain in a convivial way with friends. I drank alone, in my empty apartment, chasing oblivion in the bottom of a whiskey glass. The single malt Michael had given me for my birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me, even in my haze. I drank it all, a bitter toast to my own stupidity. I isolated myself further, the four walls of the apartment becoming my self-imposed prison. The wake-up call came, as they often do, in the form of collateral damage to people I still cared about. My parents, worried sick after days of unanswered calls, had insisted on taking me to dinner. I'd gone, reluctantly, a sullen, brooding mess. I picked at my food, offered monosyllabic answers, and drank too much wine, too quickly. Then, when my mother gently asked how I was really doing, something snapped. I lashed out, a torrent of bitterness and anger directed not at Olivia or Michael, but at my bewildered parents. I accused them of not understanding, of taking sides, of a dozen other imagined slights. I saw the hurt in my mother's eyes, the deep disappointment etched on my father's face. I'd ruined the evening, turned their concern into another casualty of my misery. The shame that washed over me was immediate and potent. Later that night, my father called. I expected a lecture, a reprimand. Instead, his voice was quiet, measured. "Son," he said, "life throws punches. Hard ones. Sometimes you see them coming. Sometimes they knock you flat out of nowhere. The measure of a man isn't whether he gets knocked down. It's whether he gets back up." He told me about his own struggles, setbacks in his career, moments of doubt and despair I'd never known about. He talked about resilience, not as some abstract virtue, but as a practical necessity. "You're allowed to grieve what you've lost, James," he said, "but don't let it define you. Don't let them take any more from you than they already have." His words, simple and direct, cut through the fog of my self-pity. He was right. I'd been wallowing, letting this betrayal consume me, define me. I'd handed Olivia and Michael the power not just to break my heart, but to break my spirit. For weeks I'd been replaying their actions, their choices. I hadn't once considered my own. A slow, dawning realization began to take hold. I'd spent 5 years defining myself through my relationship with Olivia. James and Olivia. We were a unit, an inseparable entity. My future had been inextricably linked with hers. Who was James without Olivia? I hadn't asked myself that question in a very long time. Maybe it was time I found out. The anger was still there. The pain hadn't magically vanished. But beneath it, a tiny, fragile seedling of resolve began to sprout. I was tired of being the victim. I was tired of being defined by their betrayal. It was time to get back up. I sat alone in the apartment. The silence no longer just an absence of Olivia, but a space filled with ghosts and memories. Every corner held a reminder. The spot on the couch where we'd binge-watched shows, the kitchen counter where we'd left each other notes, the bookshelf filled with books we'd read and discussed. It was a mausoleum of a life that no longer existed. And I realized, with a sudden, stark clarity, that I couldn't heal here, not surrounded by these echoes. A bold, almost reckless thought began to form, a tiny spark in the darkness. I needed a change, a real change. Not just a new routine or a different brand of whiskey. I needed to escape, to reinvent, to find a place where I wasn't James who got dumped and betrayed. The first step was symbolic, but necessary. I went to my dresser, took out the velvet box. The engagement ring still winked up at me. I'd almost forgotten about it, tucked away like a dirty secret. With a decisive click, I took a photo of it on my phone, and, my fingers surprisingly steady, listed it for sale on an online marketplace. Princess-cut diamond engagement ring, never worn, perfect for your perfect love story. The irony was bitter, but the act itself felt liberating. A small severing of a tie to a future that had been stolen. The next day I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Henderson. I didn't apologize for my recent performance, not directly. Instead, I got straight to the point. Mr. Henderson, I began, you know the Barcelona office has been looking for a senior architect for that new sustainable urban development project. They've approached me about it a few times over the years. He nodded, his expression unreadable. They have. You always turned it down. Said you were settled here. Olivia, your life in Chicago. Things have changed, sir, I said simply. If the offer is still on the table, I'd like to formally express my interest. I'm ready for a new challenge and a new city. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. The company had been keen for me to take an international posting for years, seeing it as a stepping stone to a more significant leadership role. They valued my design aesthetic, even if I felt it had become stagnant. Perhaps a new environment was exactly what I needed, professionally as well as personally. It's a big move, James. A different culture, a different way of working. I understand that, I said. I'm prepared for it. In fact, I think it's exactly what I need. A slow smile spread across his face. All right, James. Let me make some calls. But I think we can make this happen. Barcelona, eh? Ambitious. I like it. A wave of something akin to excitement, an emotion I hadn't felt in weeks, washed over me. Barcelona. The name itself sounded like a promise of sunshine and new beginnings. The momentum built quickly after that. I called my landlord, negotiated an early end to the lease. The financial penalty was steep, but the cost of staying felt infinitely higher. Then came the daunting task of dismantling the life I'd built. I started sorting through our possessions. My possessions now. Clothes, books, furniture. So much of it tied to Olivia, to us. I was ruthless. Anything that sparked a painful memory, anything that felt tainted by the past, I put in a pile to sell or donate. The apartment slowly began to empty, mirroring the emptiness I'd felt, but now it felt less like a void and more like potential. Space for something new. The research became my new obsession. I spent hours online, looking at apartments in Barcelona, reading about the culture, the food, the architecture. Gaudi's whimsical organic forms a world away from the rigid steel and glass I was used to in Chicago. Excitement, genuine and thrilling, began to bubble up, slowly but surely replacing the despair that had been my constant companion. Then came the hardest part. Olivia's remaining belongings. She'd taken most of her clothes and personal items, but there were still boxes of things she'd left behind in her hasty departure. Books, old photo albums, knickknacks, relics of our shared history. I packed them carefully, methodically, trying to detach myself emotionally. Each item was a small stab, a reminder of what was lost. But with each box taped shut, I felt a little lighter. I could have called her, asked her to pick them up, but I needed a different kind of closure. I found Michael's new address online, their new address. It wasn't hard. With a deep breath, I loaded the boxes into my car and drove across town. Michael answered the door. He looked surprised to see me, then wary. Behind him I could see Olivia, her eyes wide, her hand flying to her mouth. "James," she whispered. I didn't say anything to her. I looked at Michael. "Her things," I said, gesturing to the boxes I'd piled on his doorstep. "Thought you might want them." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Thanks, James." There was an awkward silence. This was it, the final transaction, the severing of the last tangible link. I expected to feel a fresh wave of anger, of pain, but surprisingly what I felt was relief, a profound sense of unburdening. Seeing them together in their new shared space didn't trigger the jealousy I'd anticipated. It just solidified my decision. They had their life. It was time for me to find mine. I nodded curtly. "Good luck to you both," I said, the words tasting less bitter than I expected. Then I turned and walked back to my car, not looking back. As I drove away, I didn't feel sadness or anger or even regret. I felt free. The decision had been made. My new life was waiting. The official offer for the Barcelona position came through a week later. Senior Project Lead, Sustainable Urban Initiative. It was a mouthful, but it sounded impressive, challenging. Exactly what I needed. Mr. Henderson had pulled the strings, and the Barcelona office seemed eager to have me. The start date was 6 weeks away. Suddenly, everything felt incredibly real and incredibly rushed. The next few weeks were a whirlwind, a montage of dismantling one life while simultaneously laying the groundwork for another. There were visas to arrange, bank accounts to open, a shipping company to find for the few essential possessions I wasn't selling. My small apartment became a chaotic landscape of packing boxes, bubble wrap, and to-do lists. Farewell gatherings were organized by well-meaning friends. Small, intimate dinners, a last round of drinks at our old haunts. Some were awkward, shadowed by the unspoken knowledge of why I was leaving. But others were genuinely warm, filled with support and encouragement. My sister, Sarah, was a rock, helping me sort and pack, offering practical advice and a shoulder to cry on when the enormity of it all occasionally threatened to overwhelm me. One evening, I met up with Ben, my college roommate. We hadn't seen each other much since graduation, life pulling us in different directions, but our bond was one of those easy, enduring ones. We sat in a quiet pub, nursing beers. "You know, James," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, "I remember when you first met Olivia. You were head over heels, obviously, but I also remember you before Olivia." I looked at him, curious. "What do you mean?" "You were adventurous back then," he said, a reminiscent smile playing on his lips. "Always talking about backpacking through Europe, wanting to see the world, sketching crazy, impossible buildings in your notebooks. You had this wild creative streak. Somewhere along the line, with the steady job, the serious relationship, that part of you got a little quieter." His words struck a chord. He was right. I had been different. More impulsive, more driven by passion than by pragmatism. Olivia and I had built a comfortable life, a safe life. But somewhere in that comfort, in that safety, I'd lost a part of myself. The part that dreamed bigger, that took risks. Maybe this upheaval, as painful as it was a chance to find that part of me again. Inspired by Ben's words, and by a growing need to process the emotional tsunami I'd been through, I bought a journal. A simple, leather-bound notebook. I started writing, pouring out the anger, the hurt, the confusion, but also, tentatively at first, my hopes for Barcelona, for this new, unwritten chapter. It became a ritual, a way to untangle the knots in my mind, to give voice to feelings I couldn't articulate to anyone else. As I shed the physical trappings of my old life, I found myself rediscovering old hobbies, interests I'd let slide during my years with Olivia. I pulled out my old sketchbooks, the pages filled with forgotten designs, half-finished ideas. I started drawing again, not for work, but for pleasure. I even downloaded a language learning app and began fumbling my way through basic Spanish phrases. Hola. Buenos días. Una cerveza, por favor. Each new word learned felt like a small victory, a step closer to my new reality. The apartment grew emptier each day. I sold my car. I wouldn't need it in Barcelona. The bulky furniture went next, piece by piece, until only a mattress, a suitcase, and a few boxes remained. I took a last walk through my neighborhood, Lincoln Park. The familiar streets, the cozy cafes, the park where Olivia and I had spent countless sunny afternoons. Bittersweet memories, tinged with a new sense underscore of detachment. This was no longer my home. It was a place I used to live. The final dinner with my parents was emotional. My mom fussed over me, packing me a small bag of my favorite homemade cookies, her eyes suspiciously bright. My dad, usually a man of few words, clapped me on the shoulder, his grip tight. "We're proud of you, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Scared for you too, a little, but mostly proud. Go make a life for yourself." Their support, their unwavering belief in me, was a precious gift. The night before my departure, I stood in the empty apartment. The echoes of my footsteps on the bare wooden floors seemed to emphasize the vast emptiness, not just of the rooms, but of the future stretching before me. It was a blank canvas. Terrifying, and yet exhilarating. Every tie to my old life had been severed, every bridge burned. There was no going back, only forward, into the unknown. I felt a potent cocktail of fear and freedom, a dizzying, intoxicating brew. The life I knew was over. A new one was about to begin. I was leaving behind the wreckage of a broken heart, a shattered trust. But I was also walking towards something, towards myself. Barcelona. The word itself had been a lifeline, a beacon of hope during the dark weeks in Chicago. The reality, when I finally stepped off the plane into the balmy Mediterranean air, was a potent cocktail of exhilaration and overwhelming disorientation. The airport buzzed with a language I barely understood, signs I couldn't fully decipher. The sheer sensory overload was immediate. The rapid-fire Spanish, the scent of sea salt and exhaust fumes, the vibrant colors everywhere. Culture shock hit me like a rogue wave, and with it, a sudden, acute pang of loneliness. I was truly on my own. My new apartment, secured online with a leap of faith and a hefty deposit, was a tiny, third-floor walk-up tucked away in the labyrinthine streets of the Gothic Quarter. It was undeniably charming, with its Juliet balcony overlooking a narrow, bustling alley, exposed brick walls and ancient wooden beams. It was also undeniably small, a shoebox compared to the spacious Lincoln Park apartment I'd shared with Olivia. But it was mine, my blank slate. The first few weeks were a struggle. Adapting to work in the new office was more challenging than I'd anticipated. The language barrier was a significant hurdle. While most of my colleagues spoke some English, The day-to-day business, the casual conversations, the nuances of design discussions all happened in Spanish or Catalan. I'd sit in meetings, nodding along, trying to pick up keywords, feeling like an idiot. The design approaches were different too, a greater emphasis on community integration and historical preservation than the purely commercial focus I was used to. My initial ideas often felt clunky, out of sync with the local aesthetic. Doubts gnawed at me. Had I made a huge mistake? Was I out of my depth? Slowly, painstakingly, I started to find my footing. I enrolled in an intensive Spanish course, spending my evenings wrestling with verb conjugations and bewildering grammatical rules. And I made my first local friend, Carlos. He was the perpetually cheerful barista at the tiny cafe on the corner near my apartment, the place I'd adopted as my morning caffeine ritual. He had a patient smile, a wicked sense of humor, and a willingness to endure my mangled Spanish. He'd correct my pronunciation, teach me local slang, and offer tips on navigating the city. His easygoing friendship was a small anchor in the overwhelming sea of newness. Weekends became my time for exploration. Armed with a city map and my slowly improving Spanish, I started to wander. I got lost in the winding alleys of El Born, marveled at the Sagrada Familia's fantastical spires reaching for the sky, strolled along the bustling Barceloneta beach. The city's architecture was a revelation. Gaudi's organic, dreamlike structures, the soaring Gothic cathedrals, the vibrant, modernist buildings, it was all so different, so alive, so full of history and passion. It began to seep into me, inspiring me in ways the sterile skyscrapers of Chicago never had. My sketchbook started to fill up again, not with condos, but with details of wrought iron balconies, colorful mosaic tiles, the play of light and shadow on ancient stone walls. Just as I was starting to feel a fragile sense of equilibrium, a letter arrived from Chicago, forwarded by my parents. The envelope was thick, creamy, expensive-looking. My stomach clenched. I knew, even before I opened it, a wedding invitation, Olivia and Michael. Together with their families, Olivia Hayes and Michael Carter request the honor of your presence at their marriage. A wave of unexpected pain washed over me, sharp and familiar. I'd thought I was past this, thought I was moving on. But the sight of their names intertwined, the formal announcement of their union, it felt like a fresh betrayal. Were they really that clueless? That cruel? Or was it some kind underscore of twisted olive branch, a gesture I couldn't possibly comprehend? I stared at the invitation for a long time. Part of me, a masochistic, self-destructive part, wanted to go. To stand at the back of the church, a silent witness to their happiness, a ghost at their feast. But another, stronger part, the part that was slowly, painstakingly building a new life, knew that was impossible. I couldn't go back, not even for a day. With a decisive rip, I tore the invitation in half, then into quarters, then into tiny pieces, and dropped them into the wastebasket. I picked up my phone and, with a sense of finality, blocked both their numbers. Chapter closed. For good. Life, however, has a funny way of balancing things out. A few weeks later, Carlos convinced me to go on a date. He knew a woman, a friend of his cousin, who was very nice, very pretty. My dating skills were rusty, to say the least, and the thought of navigating a first date in a foreign language was terrifying. But I figured, why not? It was a disaster. A hilarious, cringe-worthy, unmitigated disaster. Her name was Sophia. She was indeed very nice and very pretty. She also spoke about as much English as I spoke Spanish, which was to say very little. We spent the evening in a state of near constant misunderstanding, relying on exaggerated gestures, hopeful smiles, and the occasional frantic tap into Google Translate on our phones. I accidentally complimented her hairy dog, perro peludo, when I meant to say her beautiful hair, pelo bonito. She, in turn, seemed to think my job as an architect involved designing actual arcs like Noah's. We ended the evening with an awkward hug and a mutual, unspoken agreement that this was probably not going anywhere. The old James would have been mortified, would have replayed every awkward moment, berated himself for his linguistic failings. But as I walked home alone through the lamp-lit streets of the Gothic Quarter, I found myself laughing. Genuinely laughing. It was absurd, the whole situation. And in that laughter, I realized something important. I was starting to heal. The raw, gaping wound of Olivia's betrayal was no longer the defining feature of my emotional landscape. It was still there, a scar, but it wasn't bleeding anymore. I was capable of feeling something other than pain and anger. I was capable of finding humor in my own fumbling attempts at a new life, and that, I realized, was progress. 6 months in Barcelona, half a year. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime, other times like I'd blinked and Chicago was a distant dream. I now spoke basic, functional Spanish, enough to order food with confidence, navigate public transport, and even engage in simple conversations without feeling like a complete imbecile. My accent was still atrocious, according to Carlos, but I was trying. My social circle, once non-existent, had slowly expanded. It was a motley crew of expatriates and locals, connected through language classes, work, and Carlos's ever-widening network of acquaintances. We'd meet for tapas, explore hidden corners of the city, complain about bureaucracy, and share stories of our lives before Barcelona. It wasn't the deep, shared history I'd had with my friends in Chicago, but it was something new, something I was building myself. My work had improved dramatically. The initial struggles had given way to a growing confidence. I was no longer trying to impose Chicago-style solutions on Barcelona's unique challenges. I was listening more, observing, learning to integrate the city's rich history and vibrant culture into my designs. My ideas became more creative, bolder. I started taking risks, pushing boundaries, proposing concepts that 6 months ago I wouldn't have dared to even sketch. Mr. Silva, my new boss, a dapper, silver-haired Catalan with an infectious passion for architecture, had noticed. He'd started giving me more responsibility, more complex projects. I remember one afternoon, looking over a set of blueprints for a community center project in the Gracia district. My design incorporated reclaimed materials, a green roof, and open, flowing spaces that blurred the line between indoors and outdoors. It was innovative, sustainable, and deeply rooted in the neighborhood's character. I compared it mentally to the last project I'd designed in Chicago, a sleek, anonymous glass and steel tower, technically proficient, but utterly soulless. The contrast was stark. Barcelona was changing me, not just as a person, but as an architect. It was coaxing out a creativity I hadn't realized was dormant. A weekend trip to Madrid with a few of my new friends marked another small turning point. We explored the Prado, indulged in late-night churros and chocolate, and got wonderfully lost in the Retiro Park. It was on that trip, in a bustling tapas bar filled with the aroma of garlic and paprika, that I met Elena. She was an art curator, a friend of a friend, in Madrid for a conference. She was striking, with dark, intelligent eyes, a cascade of unruly curls, and a laugh that was both husky and infectious. We fell into conversation easily, debating the merits of Goya versus Velázquez, the future of art in a digital age, the soul of cities. Her passion was captivating, her intellect sharp. She challenged my perspectives, pushed me to think differently, not just about art, but about life. Our connection was immediate, intellectual, exciting. It was nothing like what I'd had with Olivia. That had been a slow burn, a comfortable companionship built over years, This was a spark, a jolt of electricity. But I hesitated. The ghost of Olivia, the raw memory of betrayal, still lingered. Was I ready for something new? Could I trust my own judgment again? Elena, perceptive and direct, seemed to sense my hesitation. She didn't push. We exchanged numbers, a promise to connect if she was ever in Barcelona, or I in Madrid. Back in Barcelona, a breakthrough project at work consumed my attention. We were tasked with revitalizing a neglected public square, turning it into a vibrant community hub. I poured all my newfound inspiration into it, working late nights, fueled by countless cups of Carlos's coffee. The design was ambitious, incorporating local craftsmanship, sustainable technologies, and spaces for public art installations. Mr. Silva was impressed. More than impressed. He started talking about the potential for me to lead a new design initiative within the firm, focusing on innovative urban renewal projects across Europe. It was a huge opportunity, a validation of the risks I'd taken, the changes I'd made. One evening, scrolling through photos on my phone, I came across a folder I'd forgotten about. Pictures of Olivia. Us in Millennium Park, smiling. A younger, more naive version of myself. Us at a friend's wedding, dancing. Us on vacation, carefree and happy. Or so I'd thought. For months I hadn't been able to bring myself to delete them. They were a part of my history, a part of who I was. But looking at them now, they felt like images from a different lifetime, a different person. The pain was still there, a faint echo, but it was overlaid with a new sense of peace, of acceptance. With a steady finger, I selected all the photos and pressed delete. It wasn't an act of anger or bitterness. It was an act of letting go, of making space. The transformation was happening, slowly, subtly, but undeniably. I was becoming someone new, someone I was starting to like. I was walking home from the office one crisp autumn evening, the narrow streets of the Gothic Quarter bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. The air was cool, carrying the scent of roasting chestnuts from a nearby vendor. I was looking forward to a quiet night in, maybe some sketching, a glass of Rioja. As I rounded the corner onto my street, my eyes fell upon a familiar figure sitting alone at one of the outdoor tables of Carlos's cafe. My heart did a strange, uncomfortable flip. Olivia. She looked different, thinner, perhaps. Her usual vibrant energy was subdued. She was nursing a coffee, her gaze fixed on the cobblestones, a lost, almost forlorn expression on her face. How had she found me? My parents, probably. I'd given them my address, of course. She looked up as I approached, her eyes widening in recognition, then clouding with a complex mix of emotions, relief, apprehension, sadness. "James," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Olivia." I kept my tone neutral, betraying none of the turmoil her sudden appearance had ignited within me. "What are you doing here?" "Can we talk?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair opposite her. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded, pulling out the chair. Carlos, ever observant, caught my eye from inside the cafe, raising a questioning eyebrow. I gave him a subtle shake of my head. "Later." "How did you—" I started. "Your parents," she confirmed. I had to see you." An awkward silence descended. The lively chatter from the cafe, the distant strains of a street musician's guitar, all seemed to amplify the tension between us. "So," I said finally, breaking the silence, "what's so important that you flew all the way to Barcelona?" She took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to her coffee cup. "I called off the wedding, James." The words hung in the air. Called off the wedding. With Michael. I felt a strange mix of emotions, a flicker of vindication quickly suppressed, followed by a weary sort of surprise. I hadn't expected that. I made a mistake, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. A huge, terrible mistake. Being with Michael, it wasn't real. Not like what we had. It was an escape, I think, from the routine, from the problems we weren't facing, but it wasn't him. It was never really about him. I listened, saying nothing, my face unreadable. Part of me, the part that still bore the deep scars of her betrayal, wanted to lash out, to tell her it was too little, too late. But another part, a quieter, more compassionate part, just felt tired. These past few months, she went on, tears welling in her eyes, all I could think about was you. Us. What I threw away, what we threw away. I was wrong, James. So incredibly wrong. I know I hurt you, more than I can ever say. But I was hoping. Maybe there's a chance for us? Her words, once the only thing I'd longed to hear, now landed with a strange, hollow thud. A chance? After everything? I'm willing to move here, James, she said, her voice earnest, desperate. To Barcelona, we can start over, we can fix this. I know we can. Move here. To my new life. The life I'd built from the ashes of the one she'd helped destroy. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I had loved for 5 years. The woman I had planned to spend my life with. And yes, a part of me, a deeply buried, foolish part, still felt a flicker of that old affection, that old connection. The history between us was undeniable, a complex tapestry of shared experiences, of love and laughter, and now of profound pain. Let's walk, I said, standing up. I couldn't sit there any longer, under Carlos's curious gaze. We walked through the darkening streets of Barcelona, the city I now called home. I found myself pointing out my favorite spots, a hidden plaza with a trickling fountain, a tiny bookstore overflowing with ancient volumes, a tapas bar that served the best patatas bravas. She listened, her expression hopeful, nodding along, trying to connect with this new version of me, this new world I inhabited. For a moment, I allowed myself to consider it. What would it be like to have her here? To try again? Could we really erase the betrayal, the pain? Could we rebuild what had been so thoroughly demolished? We ended up at a small, quiet restaurant I knew, tucked away from the tourist crowds. As we ate, we talked. Or rather, she talked, mostly. About how things with Michael had quickly unraveled once the initial excitement wore off. About her regrets, her loneliness, her realization that she'd made a monumental error in judgment. Her conversation was all about the past, about what we had, what she missed. There was nothing about who I was now, about the life I was building, the person I was becoming. It was as if she expected me to be the same James she had left behind in Chicago, waiting to pick up the pieces of our shattered relationship. During a lull in the conversation, my phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Thinking of you. How was your day? Got some news about that gallery space we talked about? A small smile touched my lips as I read her message. Elena. Our conversations were always about ideas, about the future, about possibilities. There was an energy there, a vibrancy, a forward momentum that felt a world away from the heavy, backward-looking conversation I was having with Olivia. I felt a stronger pull towards my new life, towards the future Elena represented, than towards the past Olivia was trying to resurrect. I put my phone away and looked at Olivia. The decision, which had seemed so complex just moments before, now felt surprisingly simple. Olivia, I began, my voice gentle but firm. I appreciate you coming all this way, and I hear what you're saying. But so much has changed. I've changed. Her hopeful expression faltered. What do you mean? This past year, I said, choosing my words carefully. It's been the hardest year of my life, but it's also been transformative. I've built a new life here, Olivia, a life I like, a life that's mine. I'm not the same person I was in Chicago, and neither are you." Tears streamed down her face now, silent and unheeded. "But don't you still love me, James? Even a little?" The question was a raw, desperate plea. I thought for a moment, searching for the honest answer. "A part of me will always care about you, Olivia. We shared 5 years of our lives. That doesn't just disappear. But love? The kind of love that builds a future? No. I don't think that's there anymore. You and Michael, you broke that. And I've had to rebuild myself without it." I reached across the table and, for a fleeting moment, touched her hand. "I wish you well, Olivia, I truly do. I hope you find happiness. But it won't be with me. That chapter is closed." Her shoulders slumped in defeat. The fight seemed to go out of her. She nodded slowly, accepting my words finally. After dinner, I walked her to a taxi. The goodbye was awkward, subdued, no lingering hugs, no false promises. Just a quiet acknowledgement that this was truly the end. As I watched the taxi pull away, disappearing into the Barcelona night, I didn't feel triumph or even sadness, just a quiet sense of peace. I had faced the ghost of my past, and I had chosen my future. I walked home alone, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt whole. With Olivia's unexpected visit behind me, a new sense of clarity and purpose settled in. The encounter, as emotionally draining as it had been, had served as a final, definitive line drawn under my past. Now, all my energy was free to focus on the future, on the exciting possibilities unfolding in Barcelona. The most immediate of these was a major international design competition. Mr. Silva, with his characteristic enthusiasm, had encouraged our team to enter. The brief was challenging: to design a sustainable, multifunctional community arts center for a redeveloping neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. It was exactly the kind of project that fired my imagination. A chance to blend innovative design with genuine social impact. I found myself working increasingly closely with Elena. Her gallery was advising on the public art integration aspects of the competition, and her insights into how art could foster community and dialogue were invaluable. Our professional relationship, built on mutual respect for each other's work, began to deepen. We'd have long, animated discussions over coffee or late-night brainstorming sessions, our ideas sparking off each other, creating something richer and more nuanced than either of us could have achieved alone. Her presence in my life was a quiet revelation. With Olivia, our connection had been rooted in shared history, in comfort and familiarity. With Elena, it was a meeting of minds, a shared passion for creativity, and a similar outlook on life. There was an intellectual vibrancy there, a spark that had nothing to do with need or dependency. I realized, with a sense of quiet surprise, that I was no longer defining myself through my relationships. My happiness, my sense of self-worth, wasn't contingent on whether I was with someone or not. It was an internal state, something I was cultivating myself. The Arts Center project became all-consuming. Our small team, myself, 2 junior architects, and Elena, as our art consultant, worked day and night. The design we were developing was ambitious, bold. We envisioned a building that was not just a structure, but a living, breathing part of the community. It featured flexible exhibition spaces, artists' studios, a performance hall, community gardens, and a rooftop cafe overlooking the city. I poured all my experiences from Barcelona into it. The appreciation for public space, the integration of natural light and greenery, the use of locally sourced, sustainable materials, It was the most challenging and the most rewarding project I had ever worked on. The night before the submission deadline, the atmosphere in our small studio was thick with a mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline. Empty coffee cups and crumpled sketches littered every surface. We were running on fumes, but the design was finally complete, the presentation panels polished. Elena and I were the last ones left, doing a final review of the digital files. The city lights twinkled through the studio window, a backdrop to our quiet concentration. "It's good, James," she said softly, looking up from the screen, her eyes tired but shining. "It's really good." "We made a good team," I replied. A warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the lukewarm coffee I was nursing. In that quiet, shared moment of accomplishment, something shifted. She reached out, her fingers gently touching my arm. Then, she leaned in and kissed me. It was a soft, tentative kiss, full of unspoken emotion. For a moment I was lost in it, the surprise, the warmth, the unexpected rightness of it. But then, I pulled back slightly. "Elena," I began, my voice a little unsteady. I care about you. A lot, but—" She didn't let me finish. She simply smiled, a knowing, understanding smile. "You need time," she said. "I get it. It's okay, James." She squeezed my arm gently. "The connection is there. When you're ready, it will still be there." Her understanding, her lack of pressure, was yet another gift. She respected my journey, my need to heal fully before embarking on something new. It made me admire her even more. We submitted the project the next morning, a mixture of hope and trepidation churning in our stomachs. The waiting was agonizing. A few weeks later, the results were announced. We didn't win. We came in second place. There was an initial pang of disappointment, of course. We had poured so much of ourselves into that design, but it was quickly followed by a sense of immense pride. Second place, in a major international competition, against some of the biggest names in architecture, it was a huge achievement for our small team. Mr. Silva was ecstatic, already talking about leveraging the recognition for future projects. And then, something unexpected happened. A local developer, a member of the competition jury who had been particularly impressed by our innovative approach to community engagement and sustainable design, approached me. He had a smaller but equally exciting project in mind: the adaptive reuse of an old warehouse in the Poblenou district, transforming it into a mixed-use space for artists and tech startups. And he wanted me to lead it, not just as an employee of my current firm, but potentially as an independent consultant. The possibility of starting my own small firm, of having that level of creative control and autonomy, had been a distant, almost unimaginable dream. Suddenly, it felt within reach. The second-place finish, which had initially felt like a near miss, had opened a door I hadn't even realized I was knocking on. The future, once a terrifying blank canvas, was now vibrant with an array of exciting, unexpected colors. The aroma of paella de marisco and the sound of laughter drifted from my small Barcelona apartment out onto the Juliet balcony. Inside, a group of familiar faces were gathered. Carlos, a few colleagues from the office who had become genuine friends, and Elena, her smile as warm and radiant as the Spanish sun. It was my 31st birthday. 1 year. It felt like a lifetime ago that I'd stood in my empty Chicago apartment, broken and bewildered, on the cusp of my 30th. The contrast between that night and this one was staggering. Then, I had been surrounded by the wreckage of a life I thought I wanted. Now I was surrounded by the vibrant reality of a life I had built for myself, piece by painstaking piece. So much had changed. The small design partnership I'd tentatively started with 2 of my Barcelona colleagues, Maria and David, after the Arts Center competition, was slowly but surely gaining traction. We'd landed the Poblenou warehouse project, and it was proving to be an incredible learning experience, a chance to put our sustainable and community-focused design philosophies into practice. We were small, hungry, and full of ideas. It was exhilarating. My relationship with Elena had developed slowly, organically, and meaningfully. After the competition, we'd given each other space, as promised. But the connection was undeniable. We'd started with coffees, then dinners, then weekend explorations of Catalonia's hidden gems. There was no drama, no games, just a growing affection and a deep, comfortable understanding. She was my partner, my confidant, my sounding board, and my favorite person to debate the merits of different architectural styles with over a bottle of wine. Our relationship wasn't about filling a void. It was about two whole people choosing to share their lives, their passions, their dreams. There were still moments, of course, fleeting shadows of sadness for what I had lost with Olivia. The ghost of that 5-year relationship didn't vanish completely, but those moments were increasingly rare, and they were no longer tinged with bitterness or anger. Instead, there was a predominant sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, however painful. Gratitude for the strength I'd discovered within myself. Gratitude for the unexpected path my life had taken. A few months ago, I'd received an email out of the blue. It was from Michael. It was long, rambling, and deeply apologetic. He wrote about his regrets, about the shame he still felt for betraying our friendship, about how his relationship with Olivia had ultimately been built on a flawed foundation and hadn't lasted much beyond their ill-fated wedding plans. He didn't ask for forgiveness, not directly. He just seemed to need to say it, to put it out there. I read the email several times. The old James would have seethed, would have deleted it without a second thought. But the James I was now, the one shaped by a year of profound change and healing, felt something different. I felt a sense of closure. I typed out a short reply. I told him I appreciated his honesty. I told him I had moved on. And then, to my own surprise, I typed the words, "I forgive you." And, as I hit send, I realized with a sense of quiet wonder that I truly meant it. The anger, the resentment, it had finally truly dissipated. My parents, whom I video called regularly, often commented on how different I seemed. "You look happier, James," my mom had said recently, her voice laced with a mother's knowing warmth. "More alive." And she was right. I was happier. I felt more like myself than I had in years. During one of those calls, I made an announcement. I was extending my stay in Barcelona, indefinitely. I'd even started the process of applying for permanent residency. This wasn't just a temporary escape anymore. This was home. And to prove it, I'd just put a down payment on a small but beautiful apartment in the El Raval neighborhood. It needed a lot of work. It was a fixer-upper, a blank canvas. But it had good bones, incredible light, and a small rooftop terrace with breathtaking views of the city. I was already sketching designs for the renovation, eager to create a space that was truly my own, a reflection of the life I was building here. As Elena brought out a small, homemade tarta de Santiago, a single candle flickering in its center, and my friends launched into a slightly off-key but enthusiastic rendition of Cumpleaños Feliz, I looked around at their smiling faces. This was my life now. Different, unexpected, infinitely richer. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of my world had, in fact, been the catalyst for a new, more authentic beginning. And as I blew out the candle, my wish was simple, for more of this. More joy, more growth, more love, more life, more Barcelona. 2 years after I'd left Chicago with a one-way ticket and a broken heart, I found myself on a plane heading back. Not for good, not even for a long visit. Just for a week. My parents were celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary, a milestone they wanted to mark with all their children and closest friends. There was no question of me not being there. Stepping back onto Chicago soil was a strange experience. The city, once so intimately familiar, now felt different. Or maybe it was me who was different. The towering skyscrapers, the bustling streets, the familiar cadence of Midwest accents. It was all undeniably home. Yet it also felt like a place I had outgrown, a chapter I had read and closed. Meeting up with old friends was a series of small shocks and pleasant surprises. Life had moved on for everyone. Some were married, some had kids, some had changed careers. Our conversations were a mix of catching up on each other's lives and reminiscing about old times. There was a warmth there, a genuine affection, but also an unspoken acknowledgement that our paths had diverged. I was an observer now, a visitor in a life that was no longer mine. The inevitable happened during a solo lunch outing. I was craving a proper Chicago deep dish pizza, a culinary experience Barcelona, for all its charms, couldn't quite replicate. As I sat in a booth at Lou Malnati's, a familiar laugh caught my attention. Olivia. She was at a nearby table with another man, someone I didn't recognize. They were laughing, leaning in close, the easy intimacy of a new relationship evident even from across the room. For a moment my heart rate quickened. Old habits, old hurts die hard. But then, a surprising sense of calm settled over me. She looked happy, genuinely happy. Her smile was bright, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in those last fraught months of our relationship, or even during her desperate visit to Barcelona. Our eyes met. A flicker of surprise, then recognition in hers. She excused herself from her date and walked over to my table. "James," she said, a small, almost shy smile on her face. "Wow, I didn't know you were in town." "Just for a few days," I replied, my tone polite, neutral. "Parents' anniversary?" "That's right," she said. "Please tell them I said congratulations." An awkward pause. "You look good, James. Barcelona obviously agrees with you." "Thanks, Olivia. You look happy too." And I meant it. "I am," she said, a soft blush rising on her cheeks. "His name is David. He's nice." We chatted for a few more minutes, a stilted but civil conversation. About her new job in marketing. About my design firm in Barcelona. Small talk, surface level. There were no lingering regrets, no unspoken accusations. Just two people who had once shared a life, now existing in separate orbits. When she returned to her date, I watched her go, and the only thing I felt was a mild, distant nostalgia. Like looking at an old photograph of a place you once visited. The sharp edges of the pain had long since smoothed away, leaving only a faint, almost imperceptible trace. I visited my old office, a courtesy call on Mr. Henderson. He was pleased to see me, full of questions about my work in Barcelona. The office was much the same, the familiar faces, the low hum of productivity. I felt a sense of appreciation for the foundation they had given me. But no regret. No longing to return. I was a different architect now, shaped by different challenges, inspired by a different city. Chicago, the city that had once been the entire world to me, now felt smaller, less significant. My life, my future, was in Barcelona. This was just a visit, a brief interlude. The anniversary dinner for my parents was a warm, joyous affair. Toasts were made, stories were told, laughter echoed through the restaurant. Seeing my parents so happy, surrounded by loved ones, filled me with a deep sense of contentment. During a quiet moment, my dad raised his glass to me. "To new beginnings, James," he said, his eyes twinkling, "and to sons who have the courage to chase them." Later that evening, I shared my news with them. I was officially applying for permanent residency in Spain. My little design firm was thriving. Elena and I were talking about the future, about building something lasting together. My life in Barcelona wasn't just an extended adventure anymore. It was my life. My mom teared up, a mixture of pride and a mother's natural worry for a child living so far away. My dad just smiled, a slow, satisfied smile. "Knew you'd find your way, son," he said. "You always do." As I flew back to Barcelona a few days later, leaving the familiar skyline of Chicago receding behind me, I felt no sadness, no regret, just a quiet sense of anticipation. I was going home. Back in Barcelona, life quickly resumed its vibrant, fulfilling rhythm. The Poblenou Warehouse project, my first solo commission under the banner of Puente Designs, a name Elena had helped me choose, meaning bridges in Spanish, symbolizing connection and transformation, was nearing completion. It was a stunning space, a blend of raw industrial heritage and sleek modern design, already buzzing with creative energy as artists and tech entrepreneurs began to move into their studios and offices. Seeing my vision come to life, to see people interacting with and within a space I had designed, was a profound satisfaction, a feeling far deeper than any paycheck or promotion in Chicago had ever given me. Elena had, in the most natural and unforced way, become my partner in both business and life. Her eye for aesthetics, her understanding of how space influences experience, and her shrewd business sense made her an invaluable collaborator. We worked well together, our strengths complementing each other, but we also fiercely guarded our independent identities and pursuits. She had her gallery, her curatorial projects. I had my design work. We supported each other, challenged each other, celebrated each other's successes, but we were not enmeshed in the way Olivia and I had been. Our connection was a choice, made fresh each day, not an obligation born of shared history or societal expectation. One sunny weekend, we drove up the coast to Cadaqués, a picturesque whitewashed village that had once been home to Salvador Dali. As we sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking the sparkling Mediterranean, the scent of pine and salt in the air, we talked about the future, about expanding Puente Designs, perhaps taking on international projects, about a small farmhouse in the Catalan countryside we'd seen advertised, a ruin with potential, much like my life had once been, about family, maybe, someday. The conversation was easy, open, full of possibilities rather than pressures. It was in moments like these that I reflected on what freedom truly meant to me now. It wasn't the absence of commitment, the rejection of responsibility that a younger, more callow version of myself might have imagined. No, freedom, I realized, was the presence of authentic choice. It was the ability to design my own life based on my own values and desires, not on inherited expectations or the fear of being alone. It was the freedom to be fully myself without apology or compromise. Losing Olivia, the betrayal by her and Michael, had been a brutal, devastating experience. At the time, it had felt like the end of everything. But now, looking back, I could see it with a startling clarity. That moment of profound loss, that birthday party that had shattered my world, had also been a moment of profound liberation. It had forced me off a path that was comfortable, but ultimately unfulfilling. It had stripped away the illusions I had clung to, the identity I had constructed around another person. It had broken me open. And in that brokenness, I had found the space to rebuild, to rediscover who I was meant to be. The betrayal that once seemed like a cruel twist of fate now felt like a necessary turning point, a painful but ultimately benevolent shove in a new direction. It had led me to Barcelona, to Elena, to a career that genuinely excited me, to a life that felt authentic and deeply, wonderfully mine. That evening, back in my Raval apartment, I stood on my small rooftop terrace, a glass of wine in my hand, watching the sunset paint the Barcelona sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender. The city spread out before me, a vibrant tapestry of history and modernity, a place that had welcomed me, challenged me, and ultimately healed me. I thought about the engagement ring I had sold, the ring I never gave to Olivia. The money from its sale had bought my plane ticket to Barcelona. A symbol of a broken promise had funded the journey to a new life. There was a certain beautiful, if painful, poetry in that. She chose him at my birthday, a day that was supposed to be a celebration of me, of us. And in the devastating aftermath of that choice, I was faced with my own. I could have crumbled, let the bitterness consume me. Instead, I chose freedom. I chose to walk away, to rebuild, to redefine. I chose to never look back. And in that choice, in that difficult, terrifying, exhilarating leap into the unknown, I finally, truly found myself. Life has a funny way of surprising you. 5 years have passed since that pivotal 31st birthday in Barcelona, the one where I first felt truly whole again. Puente Designs, the little firm Maria, David, and I started with more passion than capital, is now a respected boutique architecture practice, specializing in sustainable urban spaces and community-focused design. Our projects dot the landscape of Barcelona and are starting to appear in other European cities too. We're known for our innovative approach, our commitment to blending modern design with local heritage. It's demanding work, but I love it. Every day feels like a new challenge, a new opportunity to create something meaningful. Elena and I are married. Our wedding was a small, joyful affair, held in the courtyard of that old Catalan farmhouse we eventually bought and painstakingly restored. It's our sanctuary, our escape from the city bustle, filled with art, books, laughter, and the aroma of whatever experimental dish Elena is currently perfecting. And a new sound has recently been added to the mix, the happy gurgles and occasional frustrated cries of our 6-month-old son, Leo. Holding him in my arms, looking into his curious, bright eyes, I feel a depth of love I never knew was possible. We're still based in Barcelona, a city that has become irrevocably woven into the fabric of our lives. But we travel frequently, for work, for inspiration, for the sheer joy of exploring new cultures. Life is full, rich, and beautifully, wonderfully imperfect. Last Christmas, a card arrived. It was from Olivia. A picture of her. Michael. Yes, Michael. It turned out their reconciliation was more enduring than I'd imagined, and their 2 young children, all rosy-cheeked and smiling in a snowy suburban landscape. There was a short, handwritten note on the back. Wishing you and yours a happy holiday season. So glad to hear you're doing well. Olivia? I looked at the card, at their happy, conventional family, and I felt nothing but a quiet sense of peace, a genuine appreciation for how far we had all come, for the different paths our lives had taken. The wounds had long since healed, leaving behind only the faintest of scars, reminders of a past that no longer had the power to hurt. Later that afternoon, I was sitting on the terrace of our farmhouse, Leo asleep in my lap, the warm Spanish sun on my face. Elena was beside me, reading, her hand resting lightly on my arm. My sketchbook lay open, a new design taking shape, a community library for a small village in Andalusia. I looked at my family, at the beautiful life we had built together. A life born from the ashes of a profound heartbreak. The moment that broke me, that 30th birthday that felt like the end of the world, became the moment that made me. It set me on a path I would never have chosen for myself, a path that led me to everything I truly needed, everything I truly wanted. And as I looked out at the rolling Catalan hills, I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that I wouldn't change a single thing.